everybody. It is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. Welcome to episode 75 of the Old Mage MTG podcast. I'm feeling a bit down today, Alex.
Oh no.
I got some disappointing news. But what do we do when life disappoints us? We brush our worries aside and we focus on our favorite children's card game, Magic the Gathering. So we're here today to discuss Magic the Gathering. We got some MTG topics for you all today. In segment one, we're going to be wrapping up our alliances discussion with a reflection on the impact that alliances had on the game when it was released. Then we're going to discuss some decks from back in the day and some of the rares from the set that made an impact on us back then and some that are getting our attention now. Then we're going to wrap things up in the Old Mage Commander Corner. Did Alex select his 2024 Old Frame Commander yet? I don't know. Stay tuned. You could also just fast forward ahead because I'm going to have little chapters here in the YouTube. So if you need to know right away, you just click ahead. If you enjoy the podcast, please support us by 1, giving us a like, subscribing if you hadn't already. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on whatever your favorite podcast app is. You could probably find us there. If you're in the market for cardboard or cardboard accessories, please consider purchasing them through our TCG Player affiliate link. You can find that in the description, the episode description below. Why should you do that? It grows the economy. It helps everybody. Who does it hurt, Alex, to click our affiliate link? Nobody. It hurts nobody. I've got no follow-ups to last episode. Do you, Alex? Do you have anything you want to follow up? Nope.
None.
Let's get right into the main topics for today. First main topic for today is the impact of alliances. So this was inspired by a Duelist article I found, and I want to highlight some of the more interesting parts of this article. In segment 1, I'm going to take a look back at this article from the Duelist published in October 1996. This was about 4 to 5 months after the set was released. If you're watching on YouTube, as you can see right here, it is called The Impact of Alliances. It is written by Robert Hahn. And it begins by highlighting some of the cards that I remember from Alliances, in particular, a couple of the great lands. I got one showing right here. Kjeldorn Outpost, Thawing Glaciers. These are a couple of the lands from Alliances that made an immediate impact in MTG. One of the most important things you can have in a great Magic the Gathering set is, in my opinion, a great land cycle. And Alliances had a really great land cycle. You're shaking your head, Alex. You agree with that, don't you?
I agree. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Yep. Good lands. Yeah, definitely can go a long way to carrying a set.
They had replacement lands. We're going to get more into those replacement lands throughout this episode. They had another land, too, that didn't fit into a cycle. It was an unusual land. It was an outlier land. That land was Thawing Glaciers. It's the first one that the author really focuses on. No, it's the second one he focuses on in this article, but I'm going to start with this. Thawing Glaciers. Thawing Glaciers, I mean, it really made an impact, especially in Type 2, because it facilitated multicolored decks. It was not as easy to run multicolored decks in Type 2 tournaments. You didn't have dual lands. You had your pain lands, right?
Almost nothing.
You had your pain lands.
Yeah.
You didn't even have City of Brass, which was another pain land also, but you didn't even have City of Brass at the time Alliances was released. Chronicles wasn't released yet. And actually, I don't even know. Chronicles was Chronicles ever legal in Type 2?
I don't know about that. I feel like it wouldn't have been because it's, I feel like that would have been excluded from the Type 2 because it was just like reprints of.
I kind of think it was after I started to say Chronicles. But Thawing Glaciers, I'm going to read this card.
We by the way, I think we mixed up our Chronicles release chronology. Anyways, keep saying what you were saying.
I was just going to read Thawing Glaciers. I was going to tell people what Thawing Glaciers is. It is a land. It comes into play tapped. You can pay 1 colorless and tap it to search your library for a basic land and put it into play tapped. This does not count toward your 1 land per turn limit. You shuffle your library afterwards. At the end of turn, return Thawing Glaciers to owner's hand. It's a reserve list card. It has a rating of 4.369 on Gather, a current market price of $15.01. I wrote $48.12, but that's not true. But it was that high in 2021. It's currently back down to $15.01. This is a beast of a card in control decks. If you can survive, it is slow though. If you can survive an initial onslaught, this can help you slowly accumulate your resources to turn the tide and then crush your opponent. The other thing that's great about it is the shuffle your library clause, shuffle your library afterwards. This gave you a repeatable shuffle effect if you wanted to shuffle. When we were talking about Ice Age, we mentioned Brainstorm, how Brainstorm became much better as the number of repeatable or even just the number of shuffle effects increased in Magic the Gathering. It could help you shuffle away the cards you didn't want after you brainstormed. Now with Thawing Glaciers, you had this repeatable shuffle effect. What else is great about Thawing Glaciers? Not missing land drops is good. Deck thinning is good, especially if you're playing a long game, and this is a card for long games. But it is slow. That's the downside. You can see how slow this card is. You get to search your library for a land, but you put it into play tapped. Also, when you activate it, Thawing Glaciers comes back to your hand. So it takes a while to really use this to overwhelm your opponent.
Yeah, it makes me like want to look for a way to, bend the rules with it, you know what I mean? To like use it faster.
So there are some, I was gonna say, I don't know if there are ways to bend the rules, so to speak, but there are some things that I wanted to pull up here that I think go well with this card. I did a little bit of reading about Thawing Glaciers. It seems like, I don't know, I don't play much Commander at all. And the Commander that I have fiddled around with, it doesn't involve, modern cards yet, new cards. But I've done a little bit of reading. It doesn't seem like Thawing Glaciers really cuts it power-wise these days. I think it's just too slow for pretty much every format that also includes new cards. I'm not sure, I could be wrong. But that being said, there are still a lot of cards that have been printed that make this better than it was when we
that was the
pulled it.
impression I had.
Yeah.
I still, maybe your first point is still true too. Like I'm not sure how powerful it has gotten, but I feel like there are other things that work well with it these days.
There are some. Yeah, I don't know if people are really running them today, but there are some. I'm going to talk about a few.
Its price tag suggests use.
That is true. But also, it is a reserve list card. So sometimes it's hard to say. And you see these spikes, like there's these reserve list spikes. It's also come back down pretty considerably after every single spike. So this could be like speculation, people hoarding reserve list and then being like, I don't really do anything with this card.
I know people do use it still. I just don't know how competitively. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes, that is true.
I see it in like some deck lists and stuff, but
people who like high-powered decks like to build competitive decks. I don't know that they're necessarily running Thawing Glaciers anymore, but it was at some point in Type 2 tournaments, like a tournament-winning card. I wanted to talk about some cards that were mentioned on Gatherer. This was a post made by Bungie42 on the 25th of October in 2009 at 5:57 and 18 seconds p.m. Bungie wrote, Deserted Temple, Argothian Elder, Juniper Order Druid, Krosan Restore, Ley Druid, Nature's Chosen. There's a list of cards. Use a couple Stone Cedar Hierophants. Suddenly, bam, there's all my land in play. It only goes back to your hand at the end of the turn you use it. So I was like, what are these cards, Alex? These are a list of cards that were printed after Alliances that you can run with Thawing Glaciers. They make Thawing Glaciers even better than we ever imagined.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up the Deserted Temple. This is one I
I was
want to
just gonna
get.
say Deserted Temple is great with this. And obviously we didn't have access to that back then,
No.
so
We did not have Deserted Temples back then. I still don't have a single Deserted Temple. It is a land from Odyssey. It's a rare. Tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can also pay 1 colorless and tap it to untap target land. This was almost $70 in 2021. And now it's $13.37. This is as cheap as it's been since 2018. So now might not, if you don't have any Deserted Temples, now's definitely not the worst time to pick up a Deserted Temple.
I agree.
It was recently reprinted in Commander Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle
I
Earth.
was just gonna ask you what that one is worth because I actually kind of want that one.
I see 2 here. One is 685, one's 1309. I can't tell the difference between these 2 printings.
Is one pre-release maybe?
I don't know. It would be nice if they did more to differentiate these 2. Is one a foil? Oh, a surge foil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those were like maybe the box toppers.
I feel like I remember hearing about these surge foils. People were paying, I think they were paying like really big money for surge foils, and then it just absolutely collapsed, and I can't remember why. Probably because who cares about surge foils? I think Wizards did something kind of crazy. I think they like just immediately reprinted all these surge foils after some people paid like hundreds of dollars for them.
Some of them, I mean, some of the cards were more expensive cards too, like Ancient Tomb and stuff like that. So I'm not sure what those ones are going for right now.
Yeah, but it looks like you can pick up the surge foil for $13 or the non-foil for $6 to $7.
That's not bad. $6 for the non-foil. I still want to get a series of different significant scene cards from the Lord of the Rings set, like and this would definitely make the list. This would be one of them I'd want to grab. So
but Deserted Temple, so it's obvious how this works really well with your Thawing Glaciers. The reason Bungie 42 points out that it only goes back to your hand at the end of the turn you use it is because you can use it to fetch a land and then use Deserted Temple to untap your Thawing Glaciers in the same turn and then activate Thawing Glaciers again, fetch a second land. You get more uses out of it.
Nice.
I believe that's how it works.
Plus, you could use it the turn you bring it into play since it comes into play tapped. You don't have to wait.
The next one, Argothian Elder. Yeah, Thawing Glaciers comes into play tapped. Tap 1 colorless, pay 1 colorless and tap, search your library for a basic land. Then you use Deserted Temple, pay 1 colorless, tap Deserted Temple to untap Thawing Glaciers. Pay 1 colorless, tap, search your library for another basic land. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You go searching multiple times. Argothian Elder. So I really think Bosiji 42 was giving me a list of cards here that I can use to untap a land. In this case, the land being
probably
Thawing Glaciers. This is a uncommon from Urza's Saga at 76 cents. 3 colorless, 1 green, 2/2. Tap to untap 2 target lands.
Yeah, that's real nice.
You use this son of a bitch to untap both your Deserted Temple and your Thawing Glaciers. Imagine that.
Real nice, Clark.
Juniper Order Druid. This is a Ice Age card. So this did exist.
Yeah.
I don't remember watching anybody run Juniper Order Druid with Thawing Glaciers. 2 colorless, 1 green, 1/1. How would you classify this art, Alex? I'm curious to know.
I don't know. How would you?
One word. Do you have one word? I'm just curious.
Smudgy.
Okay. I was interested. I was wondering what you would say. Tap to untap target land. Play this ability as an interrupt. So you can play the Juniper Order Druid for 3 mana and then tap him to untap your Thawing Glaciers. Not the best.
No. Expensive. I would definitely overlook this, because of how much it costs. But with that combo, I mean, now its casting cost becomes worth it if you're going to be playing with, with the Thawing Glacier, maybe.
It's better. Yeah, it becomes better if you can combo with the Thawing Glacier. I was wondering if you would say the word wonky to describe this art. That's what I was saying.
Wonky?
Yeah,
Wonky?
wonky. I feel like you've used that term before to describe art similar to this.
Oh, I will again.
Okay.
This, the art, I like the art overall. If you look at like the way they did the trees and even the guy's like armor and stuff, the only part that's distracting is his face. And that's kind of maybe probably why I said smudgy, because it's so dark. It looks like he has hunky brows,
Okay.
He's real like charcoaly with the drawing on the guy's face.
Just curious. Croson Restorer. Torment. I don't know this one. I think I've seen it before and I forgot. I recognize the art. I've seen the picture before. Because this is beautiful art. You can currently pick up Croson Restorer for 6 cents. Same casting cost as Juniper Order Druid. 2 colorless, 1 green. That's 1/2. So that already makes it better. And then you can tap it to untap target land, just like Juniper Order Druid. And it has threshold. So you can untap it to untap. Sorry. And it has threshold. If you activate threshold, you can tap Croson Restorer to untap up to 3 target lands. Talk about a strictly better Juniper Order Druid.
Definitely.
I love it. Ley
The art
Druid.
reminds me of the end of Ghostbusters 2 when they all appear inside the Renaissance painting.
Don't really remember.
There was like a painting and it was all the Ghostbusters and they were all standing kind of like that looking.
Okay. I mean, that's the one where the guy was in the painting was like alive, the evil. That's all I remember. There's the classic Ley Druid, also 2 colorless, 1 green, also 1/1. Tap the Druid to untap land of your choice. This action can be played as an interrupt. I got a cat in my face. I got to move the cat. First, you're interrupting the show. I put the cat in the thumbnail last week, thinking maybe she'd get us some extra views. She did not. So she's banished from the desk today.
Bad luck, albatross cat.
And then Nature's Chosen. We talked about this last episode, literally. 1 green enchant creature. Play on a creature you control. Activation cost of 0. Untap enchanted creature, uses ability only during your turn, only once each turn. Or tap enchanted creature to untap target artifact, creature, or land. So these are all different ways that Bungie 42 shows us if we're playing green, or if we just have another land, in the case of Deserted Temple. These are all different ways Bungie 42 tells us we can untap Thawing Glaciers and get more uses out of Thawing Glaciers. Last one, Stone Cedar Hierophants. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. What does that word mean, Alex? Is it some sort of holy person? Some sort of druid? Some sort of priest?
Yeah, like it's a priesty word, but I never really thought about specifically what it meant.
This is a card from Ravnica. It's a modern bordered card. I don't know this card at all. Now I'm learning. It is 2 colorless, 2 green, a 1/1 druid. Whenever a land comes into play under your control, untap Stone Cedar Hierophant. Tap to untap target land. So this person says, use a couple Stone Cedar Hierophant. Suddenly, bam, there's all my land in play. So you can activate the Thawing Glaciers, tap it. Then you could tap the Stone Cedar Hierophant to untap the Thawing Glaciers, activate the Thawing Glaciers again, put your basic land into play, which would untap the Stone Cedar Hierophant. Right? So you could just keep doing that?
I think so.
I think so too.
Until you run out of lands in your hand.
Until you run out of lands. Suddenly, bam, there's all your land in play.
Suddenly, bam. A person, especially a priest in ancient Greece, who interprets sacred mysteries or esoteric principles.
And they untap target lands.
So it's like a priest of divination specialty.
Okay. Okay. Those are all ways you can make the Thawing Glacier even better than it was back in 95 when we pulled it out of Alliance's packs. I like all those creatures.
Yeah.
There's some good Druid options too in there. I don't know what direction you're going with your commander deck yet, but one of your options was a Druid. Right? One of your options was a
Yes, I know.
yeah. So
This is
potential.
potentially appropriate right now.
You get that Centaur Druid, Deserted Temple, Argothian Elder, Frozen Restorer, Nature's Chosen synergy going. Next thing you know, all your force are on the battlefield.
Bam.
Bam. So that was Thawing Glaciers.
I want to pause for a minute since we finished with that.
Okay.
And read you the years. Okay. Chronicles was August 95. Alliances was I lost it now, 96.
Really?
Yeah, June 96. And Homelands was October 95. So it went Chronicles and then Homelands right after, and then Alliances later. Chronicles was also in print for over a year, which we probably knew because it was just like flooded. Like the
There's a ton of it. Yeah, I think there's still a ton of it. I don't know how much. I don't pay attention to booster packs. If you wanted to like look for cheaper,
it's not expensive.
booster, I didn't think so.
I mean, it's it's more expensive than it used to be, but it is, I think they're $15 or something like that.
I figured it'd probably be the price of like a City of Brass.
This is interesting. It says Chronicles was supposed to be the first of a repeating thing where they had like a kind of like the list, like a different set of cards being reprinted, like Chronicles, Chronicles 2, Chronicles 3.
And then people flip their shit.
Yep. I was gonna say, but then that didn't happen.
So Thawing Glaciers, the biggest impact of Thawing Glaciers is that multicolored decks are now extremely viable. We mentioned that already. The next big land that he highlights in this article, the impact of alliances, is Keldorn Outpost. Keldorn Outpost is a card that we've talked about before on the show. Kelderon, K-J-E-L, Doran.
Nice.
I love this card. I've always loved this card.
Yeah, it's very cool. The art's great. It does a cool thing. Has a good feel to it.
It is a land from Alliances. When Keldorn Outpost comes into play, sacrifice a plains or bury Keldorn Outpost. Tap it to add 1 white to your mana pool. Or you can pay 1 colorless and 1 white and tap it to put a soldier token into play. Treat this token as a 1/1 white creature. This card is on the reserve list. It has a rating of 4.235 on Gatherer. Current market price of $12.94. It's still coming down.
Yeah.
Couple things he points out in this article. The card does lead to an initial card disadvantage, right? Because you have to sacrifice a plane. This is part of a cycle that they call the replacement land cycle, where you put one of them into play, and then the basic land type that they provide, you have to remove one of those basic lands from the game, or put it in your graveyard. I don't remember the exact. What's the exact? Sacrifice a plane, so it goes into the graveyard. So you lose that initial land, and then if somebody strip mines it away, you get 2 right away. You get 2 for 1, and that sucks.
And also, I mean, if you put the outpost down, you probably want to use it, as soon as you can. So that means the next turn you probably use it to make a token instead of generating mana. So it's kind of putting you like 2 turns back as far as the mana goes.
So it leads to initial card disadvantage, but if you can keep it in play, and usually it's running control decks, so you should have spells in your deck to try to protect this. It can eventually become card advantage. It can repeatedly generate creatures. Those creatures also can repeatedly eat multiple removal spells. You know, your opponent's only going to have so many removal spells. If you keep pumping out soldiers, eventually they run through it, and then you still got soldiers to pump out as long as you can protect that land. So what is initially card disadvantage can become card advantage. Another great thing about it, he mentioned, is this Wrath of God. Wrath of God often sounds the death knell for a white weenie deck, and this was a card that was often run in white weenie because it gave you a bunch of 1/1 creatures. This gives you the ability to now recover from a creature board wipe better than you were able to previously.
Yeah, or set yourself up for after the board wipe, ahead of time.
You could do it yourself, which is something that the white weenie deck didn't always do. You know, not many of them were designed around wrathing and then playing stuff out. Although I'm sure some of them probably did run Wrath of God, because sometimes in a weenie deck, you need to blow everything up, because sometimes your opponent just has something a little bit too big. Yeah.
I do think this is interesting though, because this, when you look at the card, when you look at it, the outpost, it's sort of, it screams like weenie deck at you, and that's kind of like what you think you should use it for. But it seems like where it really shines is in like a control deck, or like a board wipe deck or something like that.
Most definitely. And that's where it made its biggest impact, in control decks. Another way these lands impacted the meta is, I mean, they were both so good that many of the competitive decks were running Thawing Glaciers or Outpost or both. They were both so good that it forced people, if you weren't playing these cards, to play more land destruction. So the lands and alliances in that meta, in the Ice Age Alliances format, were so good that everybody had to either play these lands or they had to play land destruction. And there was a lot more land destruction in Ice Age alliances. They brought back Stone Rain.
Yeah, you have Stone Rain, you have the green one. What is it?
Thermokarst in green. So it was the Ice Age version of Ice Storm. They had the Ice Age version of Sinkhole, Ice Quake in black.
Oh yeah. Okay.
In red, you had, I mentioned Stone Rain already, but you also had Pillage, when Pillage, was printed in alliances. So there was a lot of land destruction. Strip mines were running around this time too.
Yeah, I mean, Strip Mine was like an auto include for us when we played. Once it got reprinted, we can get our hands on them. Before that, we didn't have them.
He mentioned somewhere right here, and actually in this article, whatever you chose, land destruction is now a must in Type 2. You had to deal with the glaciers. You had to deal with the outpost. You better be running land destruction.
See, they mentioned Winter Orb and Stasis.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people played Stasis decks right around that time.
I never ran a Stasis deck. I don't know if I ever built a Stasis deck.
Me neither.
I want to now, just to.
I always kind of hated them because they're frustrating to play against, and enough other people were doing it that I felt like I don't know. I was like, I'll go play something else.
Since we're talking about the outpost, I wanted to talk just briefly about the other replacement lands in the set. I need to mention that Outpost is part of a land cycle in alliances called the replacement lands. These are rare lands that are sacrificed when they enter the battlefield, unless you sacrifice a basic land of a given type. And they each have a mana ability that produces mana of that land's type and another activated ability. We've mentioned Kyoto on Outpost. This was, in my opinion, by far the best one. The one that made the biggest impact, at least when it came out, especially. Lake of the Dead.
I would say Lake of the Dead tied with it, because I remember it being a big deal back then. People wanted these.
Yeah, they did.
And it definitely helps you get like a combo or a big thing off really early in the game. So, I mean, it's a sweet card.
It is way more expensive
I was going to say,
days than the Outpost. And I wonder if that's just because, I mean, the Outpost, it's great. It's great for running a control deck where you just wipe everything off the board and you generate your 1/1s and stuff to rebuild. But Lake of the Dead provides this massive mana ramp, and there's always going to be amazing things to do with mana ramp. So I guess it just gets, as spells become more and more powerful, a land that ramps just becomes better and better, and more people want it to do broken things.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably
Potentially.
crucial for certain types of decks. You probably like need that mana burst. Whereas like with Outpost, like you could probably accomplish the same thing with a different card. Um, Not
Yeah,
that
I
I'm
mean,
saying it's not. I mean, I think the price disparity is a little bit odd. I do think they should be closer together in price. And also the same thing with like Heart of Yavimaya is a pretty cool card. I remember everyone trying to use it back then.
Lake of the Dead, you sacrifice a swamp to add four black to your mana pool. Heart of Yavimaya, a favorite of mine. Tap to give target creature +1/+1 until end of turn, or tap for a green. Not nearly as powerful as the Outpost or Lake of the Dead, but
No,
fun.
but it
Great to
fits
run
in
in
green,
Stompy.
and I feel like it's the downside is not such a big deal because you're already playing with like Llanowars, Birds of Paradise, and stuff. Um, so you maybe don't mind that sacrificing the forest, and it can stack with your like giant growth shenanigans and berserk and stuff like that. So
Yeah. The Trading Post, Balduvian Trading Post in red, you can tap to add one colorless and one red to your mana pool. Or you could pay one colorless, tap to deal one damage to target attacking creature. Not that great. Don't get much use out of that. Would be so much better if you could just deal one damage to a non-attacking creature. It might be too good. I don't know if it'd be too good. It'd probably be too good.
I don't think it'd be too good as long as
You
you
don't think
made
it'd
it
be too good?
creature and not creature or player. I think it would still be pretty reasonable. Uh, I I want this card to be better. Like I've always had one, and I've like you know I don't know. I just want it to be better.
I've never played it. Never
Tapping it
bothered
for two
playing it.
mana is good. Like it gives you like you lose that one land, but it's a little bit of like mana ramp.
Yeah.
But it's just yeah, you have to pay mana, and it has to be an attacking creature to use it. The second ability should be a little bit better.
You can use it these days to, if you're playing pre-modern, to nail somebody's goblin lackey when it's coming at you. But you can't get it onto the battlefield first turn. So like you can't really use it to stop a first turn lackey. The lackey's already going to cause trouble for you before you can even use the trading post to deal with it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
And
the
then
fact that it's that slow and you have to pay the mana to use it in order, then you have other options for dealing a damage to a creature.
Yeah.
There's just like other things you can do.
Yeah. It's not a good card. So Devi Excavations. One that I think another one I've never played, but I think it might be a little bit better than I got to start playing it for a little bit just to
I
see if it
bought one a
really
while ago
helps.
during the frenzies.
So did I. Haven't used it.
Neither I am.
Again, you can tap this one for a colorless and a colored. In this case, one colorless, one blue. Pay one colorless, tap, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library. So it helps you filter through your library a little faster. Never used it though. So those are the replacement lands.
I was gonna say that'd be a fun card in like a draft format or something,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
kind of
just
format
never.
where your deck is just like made up of like whatever the best things you had in front of you were when you put it together.
Yeah.
And like then that helps you kind of like play around.
It just never makes the cut in the 60 card
Yeah.
constructed for me. Yeah. Never makes the cut. Those are the replacement lands. The author highlighted Thawing Glaciers and Kyoto Run Outpost as the ones that really made an impact in these early days of alliances. The author then moved on to a group of cards, another group of cards that changed existing play strategies here in this section called Alliances in Play Strategy. And these are the pitch spells. The author says, when we look back on alliances with the benefit of hindsight, the so-called pitch cards, Pyrokinesis, Force of Will, Contagion, Scars of the Veteran, and Bounty of the Hunt may emerge as the set's most important addition.
Fair.
I agree with that. Yeah. I really love the replacement lands, but the pitch cards, I mean, that mechanic was revolutionary. He mentioned how these cards changed people's play patterns, which is exactly what we complained about last episode when it came specifically to Force of Will. How I used to be able to As a
Count
blue
your opponent's islands.
yeah, as a blue mage, you had to leave 2 blues open. As the opponent of a blue mage, you could feel a little bit safer doing things if they didn't leave 2 blue open. You could still get screwed. There could be some lunatic mage out there running a 4 spike, just leaving 1 blue open, waiting for you to tap out and then 4 spike in your ass. That could still happen. But with Force of Will, all of a sudden they just could tap out and then still counter it, whatever you played, and that was very irritating. What does he say here? By providing effects for no mana cost, players can no longer act with confidence just because their opponent is tapped out. Blue can still counter that critical spell. Terrible. Terrible.
Terrible.
Red can still kill off all of your small attackers. Black can decimate 2/1 toughness creatures or permanently reduce an Urnam Jinn into a green kobold tour guide, providing guidance to the ways of forests. This was a weird sentence.
Read that again.
Black can decimate 2/1 toughness creatures or permanently reduce an Urnam Jinn into a green kobold tour guide, providing guidance to the ways of forests. Essentially saying, that's his way of saying, his a poetic way of saying that you can turn your Urnam Jinn into a 0/1 that provides forest walk.
Yeah. It would have been, I don't know if it'd be a 0/1. What is contagion? How many points?
I think it was -1, -2. But it's two, I'll pull it up on MTG stocks actually. I think you put 2 -1 -2 counters. And
I think it's -2 -1s, right?
Is it? Okay. I might have it the other way around.
That way, yeah, then that would, yeah. And then that makes the Urnam Jinn 0 power, so he's no longer a threat, and he's providing you forest walk.
Okay, -2 -1. So essentially a green kobold forest tour guide.
I see why I did kobold now, because all the kobolds are like 0/1.
0 something, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So knowing that, I should have known it was -2 -1 counters. Back to the author's words. White can turn your confident final assault into a devastating loss by turning a final 10-point fireball into a 3-point lightning bolt and then killing you off with a horde of lions in orders. Green can. Well, green can. Anyhow, I don't like that. I don't like what he's doing to green here. Poor green.
Yeah, especially compared to the Scars that he made up a funny scenario for Scars of the Veteran, but
he's shitting on Bounty of the Hunt, which in my opinion is respectively in the middle of this pitch card cycle. And then he highlighted what I always thought was the worst spell in this cycle. He talks about Scars of the Veteran, the white pitch card. As long as your opponent is holding more than 1 card in her hand, you have to assume she can react to your strategy. With the exception of Green's Bounty of the Hunt, pitch cards are uniformly powerful in effect. Again, shitting on Bounty of the Hunt. This was illustrated in a tournament I attended around the time of Nationals, and a classic Necro versus anti-Necro white weenie contest. Both players were pounding away with pumped up, unblockable knights and orders. Both players were a turn away from death, and the anti-Necro player had just attacked and tapped out, so he was beyond the help of a Swords to Plowshares. The Necro player then drew a Drain Life. He attacked to bring his opponent within range of Drain Life and threw down the kill. The anti-Necro player discarded a Wrath of God, cast Scars of Veteran to stay alive, and went on to kill the Necro player during his turn. So highlighting a killer play with what I think is the worst card of the pitch spell cycle. We've never run Scars of the Veteran. We've talked about Scars of the Veteran before.
Try it. I mean, I know it's definitely the worst one.
It's definitely the worst one.
It's useless.
It's never useless. Just like back in the day, reverse damage wasn't useless when you would fireball me and I'd reverse that damage. Or righteousness, yeah. They come out of nowhere when you don't expect them. They do nothing for you most of the time, but that one time when they do something and somebody who writes for the Duelist is looking over your shoulder, you get an article written about your play.
Yeah.
But most of the time they're not very good. One of the disappointing things about Scars of the Veteran is the counters that it puts on to your creature don't stay.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. If the counters were permanent, That would be great. It would also be cool if they made it so that you could feasibly cast it without the pitch cost, you know? Like if this was like white 2 or white 1,
Yeah.
regardless, aside from the pitch cost, like then it would be a somewhat better card.
It's 4 colorless, 1 white. You may remove a white card in your hand from the game instead of paying the casting cost. Prevent up to 7 damage to target creature or player. For each 1 damage to a creature prevented by Scars of the Veteran, put a +0/+1 counter on that creature at end of turn. Oh wait, do they stay? Put a +0/+1 counter on that creature at end of turn. Why do we think they don't stay?
Are we both dumb?
We might be, yeah.
Ah,
I mean, it's happened before.
yeah.
We've made dumb mistakes.
I'm looking at the Gatherer edit. If it's a creature, put a +0/+1 counter on it for each 1 damage prevented this way at the beginning of the next end step. So no, they are permanent counters.
Okay. At the beginning of the next end step,
All
not the
bets are
beginning of the
off.
next turn.
Guards of the
What?
Veteran back in the running.
But they don't, it doesn't, it adds however many +0/+1 counters for every 1 damage that was done to the creature. It adds 1 of these counters.
It was prevented with the Scars of the Veteran.
Yes. So it can go up to 7, but it doesn't add 7 of these counters.
Well, it could add 7 of them. If
It
took
could.
7 damage.
But if somebody pyroclasms
Then it'll be 4.
for 2 damage,
For
it'll be
2.
2. It'll be 2.
What's
2 damage. Pyroclasm's 2 damage.
what's the one that's 4 out? Fire Blast. Is that it? Where you sacrifice 2 mountains?
Yes, but that's just to 1 target. Pyroclasm is the sweeper that does 2 damage to all creatures.
Yeah, okay.
We will highlight Pyroclasm in an upcoming episode.
So, I mean, I can see what they're talking about in the context of like a weenie versus weenie battle. Now, you did a combat trick that saved your creature, and you put a bunch of defensive counters on it, and now they can't kill it with their other, all their other small creatures. So,
I still think it's the worst of the cycle. I'm
definitely,
dying on that hill.
definitely.
So after talking about play strategy, new play strategies introduced by Alliance's cards, he then highlighted how some of the Alliance's cards affected existing strategies. I just want to mention a few of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. Changes to existing strategies. He discusses Necro, because Necro decks were big at this time. Necro received Dystopia and Contagion. So the best additions to the Necro deck from Alliances were removal cards. Dystopia is a great sideboard inclusion to fight white and green decks. And Contagion, we just saw that. It adds -2, -1 counters. You can use it to neuter your opponent's creatures and turn them into kobolds, potentially. Talked about white weenie decks. White weenie decks got way better when Alliances was printed, in my opinion. Specifically because of the Outpost. Keldron Outpost allowed weenie to go wider than ever before. Not really. You had token generators before, but this was a really good token generator. And it was a land, which is usually harder to get rid of than other permanent types. It helped you recover from board wipes. You could Wrath of God, then generate a bunch of 1/1 tokens. Since the tokens were white, they could be pumped by your Anthem effects. All of a sudden, you got a Crusade out on the table. You're not just generating 1/1s, you're generating 2/2s. All of a sudden, you got 2 Crusades on the table. You're not just generating 1/1s, you're generating 3/3s. In weenie decks that use Crusades, the fact that the 1/1 soldier tokens are white makes the Outpost an even stronger choice. The author also loves Scars of the Veteran. Scars of the Veteran is another great choice since the weenie player will usually have ample white cards in hand. With Scars, the Savannah Lion can not only block an Urnum and survive, but can become a 2/5 blocker because, as we've learned, the counters stay. We screwed that up, Alex.
We did.
Against an opponent using red direct damage to kill creatures, Scars of the Veteran can throw off calculations horribly. That's true. He talks about green-white decks, specifically green-white Armageddon. What are the cards he mentions here?
Over Spirit Guide.
Elvish Spirit Guide. You have Elvish Spirit Guide, of course. I can't forget about that one. It can speed up the Armageddon players' plans. You got your Spirit Guide to help you get in a little faster or to recover from getting a little faster. He mentioned a few other cards.
So wait,
nothing that blows my mind.
Sorry, before you keep going, I think this is a really interesting comment that's like meta specific, and I think that's interesting. It says with Elvish Spirit Guide, you can put out a first turn Whirling Dervish against Necro.
Yes.
So like in a format where Necropotence is like, one of the top decks, then a first turn Whirling Dervish, is a game changer. And
that's nasty.
Yeah. I like that. That's pretty cool.
That's nasty. Green White Geddon. Earn'em Burn'em. Earn'em Burn'em Red Aggro, aka Red Aggro. Added direct damage in the form of Guerrilla Tactics, which is a card that we talked about last week from Alliances. You love Guerrilla Tactics. It added Pillage, which we talked about last week. A great card. Both of those we mentioned last week. He mentioned Rogue Sky Captain as an option for the red-green aggro player after Alliances was printed. And I thought to myself, what the hell is Rogue Sky Captain? I don't remember this card at all. I don't remember ever playing with it. I remember
the name.
Ever playing against it, so I looked it up. And I'm going to pull it up
again
for all of you. I'm surprised he decided to highlight this card because looking at it, I thought to myself, this is terrible. It's a rare from Alliances. You can pick them up for 52 cents right now. It's
tiny print.
Tiny print. 2 colorless, 1 red, 3/4 flying. Summon Mercenary. I wonder if today this is a bird mercenary. Is it a bird soldier?
Oh.
If it is, it's not going to make my pre-modern bird soldier deck. So it's 3/4 flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a wage counter on Rogue Sky Captain. During your upkeep, pay 2 colorless for each wage counter on Rogue Sky Captain, or remove all wage counters from Rogue Sky Captain, and target opponent gains control of Rogue Sky Captain.
So similar to a cumulative upkeep.
But it's of 2 colorless, and if you can't pay this 2 colorless just for a 3/4 flyer, you loot. It doesn't even get buried or anything. You have to hand it over to your opponent.
Yeah, you give it to your opponent.
Now, I'm assuming your opponent then has to pay the upkeep, so maybe it comes back to you.
Yeah.
But then they could just not pay it, and then it comes back to you with Summoning Sickness? This is something I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember if changing control gives something Summoning Sickness. I don't think it does.
Okay. We'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
Look it up real quick, Alex. Okay. But let's say it doesn't. Let's say you can still attack with it. I mean, you're going to lose this person. You're going to lose this guy. You have to funnel all your mana. You'll get 1 attack with it before you have to start funneling all your mana into just maintaining control of the Rogue Sky Captain, when I think there's probably 100,000 other things you'd rather do. So I'm down on the Rogue Sky Captain. I don't think this really made much of an impact at all. I think the author was really calling it out as something that might make an impact for red-green players.
I remember someone playing it, like just for a little while. And I think maybe with a gimmick.
Okay.
But
development of new strategies. This is the next thing that the author talked about and how they finish up the article. What new strategies are now viable that weren't previously viable once the Alliance's card pool hit the scene? He talked about a few here, but he started off with one that I want to talk a little bit more about. It's Turbo Stasis, Alex. Turbo Stasis. We were just talking about how Stasis decks, how we never really played Stasis decks. This is a turbo one. The most famous Alliances inspired deck to date is the Turbo Stasis deck, an offensive Stasis deck that first generated a huge amount of interest after the US National Championships. 3 of the 4 Turbo Stasis entrants to the tournament made the top 16 and 2 made the final 4. So I found another comment about this deck somewhere else. Only 4 players played it: Matt Place, Mike Long, Mike Dove, and Derek Rank. Of those players, 3 made it into the round of 16, 2 onto the Nationals team. The only reason the other one didn't make it to 16 was that it ran into a 4 Yoshin soldier standard deck. That's why I wanted to read that, because that made me laugh. Because somebody must have been worried about facing Stasis, because I don't know if you remember. I don't remember if you remember Yoshin Soldier.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It was originally printed in Antiquities, and was it printed in Revised too? We pulled it from something.
it has
4th
a few
edition.
reprints. 4th edition, yeah.
4th edition. Okay, that's what those are the packs that I pulled it from. It is 3 colorless. Attacking does not cause Yoshin Soldier to tap. It's 1/4, so it's probably it's one of the lowest casting cost creatures with vigilance that you can get out on the board. So people were able to, the 4 Yoshin Soldier guy was able to sneak his Yoshin Soldier out before he got stasis locked. And then he whooped on the Turbo Stasis deck. 3 cards from Alliances made Turbo Stasis successful, and they're mentioned in this article. Force of Will, Arcane Denial, in Limdol's Vault. So Limdol's Vault is a card from Alliances, a black-blue card from Alliances with a lot of text. It helps you assemble the cards you need even faster. I'm going to pull that up real quick on MTG stocks.
I like this one.
Limdol's Vault.
Great art, great feel, cool effect.
This is some art that was really done dirty by the washed out printing in Alliances. 1 blue, 1 black instant. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life to put those cards on the bottom of your library and look at the top 5 cards of your library again. Shuffle all but the top 5 cards of your library. Put those 5 on top of your library in any order. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. Reprinted in Commander 2013 and in a secret layer. The Alliance's printing is $2.89. Here's a case where the modern frame reprint is actually more expensive. I do like the art on this one.
I picked up some of the secret lair ones from the 30th anniversary.
Yeah, so did I.
I like those a lot. They're pretty cool.
Commander 2013 one is $4.16. It has pretty sick art.
The art's good, but the border sucks.
I know. Oh well. Very weird ruling on Gather. I want to pull that up real quick. I forgot about that. It's not even a ruling. I don't know that I've ever seen this before. In the ruling section, instead of writing a ruling for Limdol's Vault, they just restate what the card says. Because obviously people were not getting what was in the original text, but it's just a restatement of it, and it's not even more concise. They just break it down into steps. Rulings. Instead of a ruling, it's an in other words. It says, in other words.
Well,
Step 1, look at the top 5 cards of your library. Step 2, if you like them, proceed to step 3A. If you don't like them, proceed to step 3B. Step 3A, shuffle the rest of your library, then put those 5 cards back on top of your library in the order you want. The spell has finished resolving. Step 3B, put those 5 cards on the bottom of your library in the order you want. Pay 1 life, return to step 1.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're kind of probably trying to be a little funny there, but I think the point of that ruling is that these happen in discrete, like, steps one after the other chronologically,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, somehow doing some of this all at once.
As somebody that's confused very easily though by Magic cards, this one was never that was not confusing to me.
No, yeah, sentence by sentence, just go through. It tells
Yeah.
you.
I don't know that I've ever seen. I don't know that I've come across anything like this on Gatherer where they just take a card with a lot of text that's like a paragraph, multiple sentences, and
No,
then
I
just
don't.
break it down into step 1, step 2,
No, I
step
don't
3.
think I've seen that before either.
Now on to Turbo Stasis. I want to look at the whole deck. What the hell's in this deck other than Force of Will, Arcane Denial, and Limdol's Vault? This is Turbo
Boomerangs.
Stasis by Mike Long, 4th place, 1996 Nationals. I want to start by saying what makes this deck turbo. We've talked about some turbo decks so far on the Old Mage MTG podcast. We talked about Turbo Xerox, but this doesn't function at all like Turbo Xerox. This is turbo for another reason. It's turbo because you kill your opponent with this Stasis deck in the way a lot of Stasis decks kill their opponent, just by forcing them to run out of cards. This one includes 4 Howling Mines, which is the turbo part of it. You just make them draw and you deck your opponent faster with the Howling Mines. The theory is simple and effective. Play a Howling Mine on turn 2, a Stasis on turn 3, and keep it so your opponent does not get another untap phase for the rest of the game. That's the idea. The cards in the deck are counterspells in the form of Arcane Denial and Force of Will. Arcane Denial, this is a card that we talked about from last episode. It's a counterspell in alliances that actually causes your opponent to draw 2 cards when you've countered their spell. If you're playing
So
a deck
totally
where the
fine in this.
Yeah, if you're playing a deck where the idea is to deck your opponent, you don't care if you got them to draw cards,
Yeah.
which just made me think maybe I start working on my Jin deck again. There's that Jin from Mercadian Mass, that blue Jin that's like a 4/4 flyer for 3, and your opponent gets to draw 3 cards when you play it.
Yeah. There you go.
But Arcane
Not,
Denial, Force
not
of Will.
only are you trying to get the, not only are you trying to like mill or deck your opponent, but it's also a lockdown deck. So them getting the cards doesn't help them either. So it's kind of like a double, double whammy.
It's also a lockdown deck because it has Stasis. Each player skips his or her untap phase during your upkeep. Pay blue or bury Stasis.
Kismet.
And it's Kismet, the old Stasis Kismet combo. Kismet,
Yeah.
artifacts, creatures, and lands target player controls come into play tapped. So you're trying to lock their shit down. It is Boomerang. So Boomerang can be used to bounce back something that your opponent snuck in that you don't want on the board. It can also be used to bounce back your Stasis. So you can replay your Stasis. Gives you an untap phase. Recall to get back your counters, to get back any critical lock piece that your opponent might get rid of. What else can that get back for you? Anything. What do you get back with your recall here mostly? I think
Probably
your
like
Stasis.
the Forces of Will,
Force of Will.
Arcane Denials.
I think your counters and your Stasis.
Yeah. My question is, what do you pitch? That's always what I want to know is like, what do you discard with the recall? Redundant Howling Mine, Despotic Scepter, land.
That one, yeah, those would be, I would say land and scepters probably.
Yeah.
Despotic Scepter. Tap to bury target permanent you own. It's one colorless. So again, this is probably to get rid of your Stasis if you need an untap. If you need an untap phase, I think that would probably be my bury target. Felden's Cane. If you're having trouble decking your opponent faster than you're decking yourself, you can reshuffle your graveyard into library with the cane. We mentioned the Kismet. Ivory Tower's great also. You're not going to be playing a whole lot with your Stasis. And let's say they get a quick creature out, turn 1 or turn 2. You can gain life from this Howling Mine and potentially gain more life than they can do in damage from a creature they got on the board every turn. So.
Yeah.
So I liked the turbo. I like this turbo Stasis deck. I'd be interested in giving it a spin.
Oh yeah, I like it too. It's very simple. It's like just a nice like Stasis lock deck. I like the Despotic Scepter in here.
Yeah. So you counter, you lock, and then you deck your opponent.
So I like Limdol's Vault. What I think the one thing I would just like the comment I want to make about it is that we've seen demonic consultation a lot, you know, for people trying to just like rifle through their whole deck to get to what they want.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like, I don't know, a little bit cheap. Like I don't think demonic consultation was really designed that way, like the way some people use it, or you know, I think Limdol's Vault captures the essence of what's going on there better. Like
without being broken.
yes, it's a reasonable card to do that. It has a good cost to effect ratio. It's not broken. You can't go through your entire library, you know. Yeah.
Demonic consultation, an idea or like an example of a card that maybe they didn't play test adequately.
That's how I feel, but
Limdol's Vault,
maybe I'm wrong.
A version of the card they would have came up with if they had play tested adequately.
Yeah.
Could be wrong, but yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So we talked about, the author of the article talked about a couple other strategies too, new strategies that developed during the first few months that alliances existed on the scene, but I don't care so much about them. So I'm going to move on after Turbo Stasis. If you want to read the rest of this article, you can check it out. It's pretty good. It's in the Duelist number 13, Duelist issue number 13.
By the way, I wanted to point out at the top of the article, we were still talking about the chronology of the sets. The very, 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 very beginning, top left,
this part,
the most eagerly awaited expansion set since Legends.
Okay.
What they said about alliances.
It might be.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because, you know, after that run of, you know, Chronicles, Homelands, etc., you know, the only outlier there would be the Dark. And I would just wager that, like, it's still probably true because after Legends, people were spoiled and they weren't, like, pumped for, you know, like a new set that would be better than the last set.
Yeah. That's my guess. So that's the end of segment 1, the impact of alliances. We're going to move on to segment 2. Segment 2, we're going to discuss some rares from alliances. Last week,
rares,
we discussed some commons and some uncommons. Not all of the commons and uncommons, just the ones that are of particular interest to us. Today, we're going to discuss the rares. Not all of the rares, just some of the rares that are of particular interest to us. Some that we liked from back in the day. Some that are even more interesting to me now. First one I want to talk about is Helm of Obedience.
Yes.
This was a very exciting card when it first came out. I liked it very much.
I love this. This was a big hype card. Yeah, when it first came out, this was one of the top few cards in the set.
I know that I played Helm of Obedience. I have one that I don't know if I pulled it out of a pack from back in the day or I traded for it or what. I do know that I didn't like build around the card in any way. I was just like, this is an example of a card that I was like, this is cool. I'm just going to put it into my deck.
Yeah, I think that's how we all kind of felt about it. It was just kind of like, oh, here's a chase card that's like kind of a banger. Just pop it in the deck. But yeah, it would be better if you built around it, probably.
Oh. It is an artifact. It's 4 casting cost. You can pay X colorless and tap. Put the top card of target opponent's library into his or her graveyard. Continue doing this until you have X cards or a creature card into the graveyard, whichever occurs first. If the last card put into the graveyard is a creature card, bury Helm of Obedience and put that creature into play under your control as though it were just cast. X cannot be equal to 0. So I'll say if you're a casual player, this is just a fun card. It's always fun to be able to manipulate your opponent's decks. It's always fun to steal creatures. Here you got to do both at the same time. I think it added a whole new element to mill strategies. I think this is the first time like the mill effect in the and the thievery effect were ever mixed like this before.
Yeah.
You can mill your opponent and steal shit that you milled at the same time. Don't think there was anything that ever did anything like that. And you could funnel big mana into this. We saw Lake of the Dead as a ramp option. Other ramp spells. You could ramp into Helm of Obedience and potentially mill far more than just the 2 cards you could mill with Millstone.
Yeah. The thing about it though is that, like, I mean, if you hit the creature, then you've wasted a lot of mana. If you hit the
That is
creature
true.
early. So
That
I
is true.
prefer to use it, I think, in like little pings, like do it for 1 or 2, 1 or 2, 1 or 2. Like, and then maybe combine it with something that can untap an artifact.
Which not that much existed back in the
No.
day. I don't remember what we had, but there are some things now. Next thing I was going to say was punishes creatureless decks and decks that just run a few big beaters. So this is related to the point you just made. If you know what your opponent's playing, if you're not on game 1 any longer, you could even sideboard this in against creatureless decks and be just like, screw you, man. You're decking me, I'm decking you. It's become easier to exploit over the years. This is again related to the thing you just said about untapping it. There's more opportunities or more spells you can use to untap artifacts, and then you could retap.
Yep.
I don't know exactly when it got easier to exploit. I said it's become easier to exploit over the years. I don't know exactly when that happened. Looking on MTG Top 8, there were 0 decks that popped up in my search between 1995 and 2003 that ran Helm of Obedience. So in this pre-modern era, I think it was just a fair and fun card. It was, I don't know that anybody ever really exploited this card like 2003 and prior. But later, there were cards that appeared that really made this card broken. If you comboed with them. I saw one mentioned on Gatherer, and I'm going to pull this up. I forgot to pull this up earlier. It's mentioned in the rulings, and it's also in one of the comments. Tempest Eye. On April 22nd, 2009. 10:55 and 31 seconds in the AM. Tempest Eye had something to say about Helm of Obedience. Trying to find his comment. Where in the hell is this comment, Alex? Wait. I snipped it. It's in the show notes, but like it's not here. How's that possible?
Are there comments under the Masters Edition version?
Oh, I know why. Sorry. So Helm of Obedience at some point was comboed with Leyline of the Void. I heard this and I looked up Leyline of the Void. I was like, what the hell is that? It is a rare from Guild Pact. And actually, when I saw this art, I was like, oh, I had seen this card before. Like when I was browsing through Modern Frame cards, I've come across this one before. Where are you at? I'm looking for you. Tempest Eye. Maybe you're on page 2. Are you on page 2? Tempest Eye, where did you go? Alex, where'd Tempest Eye go? Gatherer comments don't just leave. They don't just disappear. Well, forget it. I'm just going to read what Tempest Eye said. Tempest Eye, on April 22nd, 2009 at 10:55 and 31 seconds in the AM, said, Helm of Obedience forms a 2-card infinite mill combo with Leyline of the Void.
If you activate Helm with Leyline,
where are you reading that?
It causes all of the cards in that target opponent's library to be removed from the game. Then
where is it at, Alex?
It's on page 1 of Helm of Obedience discussion.
Really? The alliances? Were you on the alliances one?
I don't know. Maybe no, I guess maybe I'm on the
Is this what I did wrong? Okay, so here we okay, so this one, alliances just has one page of discussion. Do I have to go to the Masters
I'm
edition
on one,
too?
just 3 pages of discussion to me, and I don't know if that's because I clicked on Masters Edition.
Let me click on Masters edition. I'm looking
Yeah,
for you,
that must
Tempest
be it.
Eye. Ah,
must
there
be
we go. I had to click on the Masters edition.
And it's like halfway down, I think. There you go.
Okay, let me do this again. April 22nd, 2009. Tempest Eye logged in, and at 10:55 and 31 seconds in the AM, he posted this. Helm of Obedience forms a 2-card infinite mill combo with Leyline of the Void. If you activate Helm with Leyline of the Void in play, it causes all of the cards in that target opponent's library to be removed from the game. Then when your opponent is next forced to draw a card, they will lose the game. There's actually a ruling about Helm of Obedience and Leyline of the Void. Here on Gatherer also. This was a ruling that was written here in 2008. If an effect like that of Leyline of the Void prevents cards from being put into your opponent's graveyard, the process described in the first sentence of Helm of Obedience effect will never stop. Your opponent's entire library will be exiled, even if X is 1. So you remember, Helm of Obedience puts the top card of your opponent's library into his or her graveyard. For those like us who don't know modern cards, there's probably not many of you out there who don't know Leyline of the Void, because I think it's kind of famous.
Yeah.
If you play Leyline of the Void, it's an enchantment for 2 colors, 2 black. If Leyline of the Void is in your opening hand, well, let's start here. If Leyline of the Void is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. I already hate that.
Yeah.
You printed a 4 casting cost enchantment that you're like, if it's in your hand, then you just get to start the game with it in play. Like, you just get to drop it on the battlefield. I don't understand that. Broken already, but okay. And then next, if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exiled instead. So basically, you drop Leyline of the Void, you activate Helm of Obedience to put a card in their graveyard. If Leyline of the Void is in play, it can't go into their graveyard. So you just keep putting the next card, which is the top card, into their graveyard. It's an infinite combo to totally deck your opponent if you have Helm of Obedience and Leyline of the Void in play. I don't like infinite combos, Alex. I don't like
I hate it.
infinite.
I especially hate this because it abuses the fact that, like, you know, the graveyard versus exile thing. Like, I feel like the Helm of Obedience should just stop after the number of cards, even if they get exiled instead of go to the graveyard.
They should. They should.
You know?
They should errata Helm of Obedience to fix goofy situations like this.
Yeah.
I don't like infinite combos, especially when they only require 2 cards. If you're going to have some goofy infinite combo, it should require at least 5 cards. It has
And
to
one
be
of them's
wonky.
free to cast if it's in your opening hand.
That's true. That makes me mad. That makes me mad on its own.
Yeah.
Stuff like this, it feels like I wrote that it feels like a bug in the code and the game is glitching out. These 2 cards are not functioning in the way they were intended to function.
And they couldn't reconcile them with each other in a good way.
So they should have I feel like this should be errata. I mean, they do that sometimes. They errata stuff.
I think so too. Or, I mean, Leyline of the Void probably never, I mean, I don't know, maybe this would open up a whole other can of worms, but perhaps Leyline of the Void should say, whenever a card is put into the graveyard, exile it.
Yeah.
Instead of the instead part, and then that way the Helm of Obedience thing would work the way it's supposed to.
The problem with us trying to like errata these cards right now so it didn't create this infinite combo glitch is we don't understand how Leyline of the Void is currently used. So
yeah, I don't know all the other cards that might affect if we changed how it worked out. But boo.
But boo. I'm being a cranky old man. So this is what I say when I say it's become easier to exploit over the years. This used to just be a really fun card that we were all like, oh, this is cool. Let me slip it in whatever my deck happens to be. People did some more, what do I want to say? Strategic things with it back in the day, but it was never able to be exploited to this extent where you mulligan till you get a ley line of the void in your hand, and then you just play it for free, and then you have to cast Helm of Obedience.
Yeah.
What? You could technically do this first turn, couldn't you?
Sure, yeah, why not?
Ley line of the void
Some dark rituals or
first turn, Lotus Petal, Mishra's Workshop, fucking other things, Elvish Spirit Guide, activate Helm, boom.
Yeah, I mean, you could use like a culling of the week or dark rituals or, things like that to.
Doesn't seem right.
It's not right.
You should just use it the old-fashioned way, the fair way.
I agree.
Pay X, pay 5, flip over some cards, steal a Gosbon Ogre, some shit.
Well, that's like your worst case scenario. I understand that sometimes it's not going to work. I know one of the comments on here was like, oh, you're going to get some crap 1-drop. But I'm kind of like, well, what the hell is a crap 1-drop doing in your competent opponent's deck? Like.
Or, I mean, get a crap 1-drop and then next turn get something else.
Yeah.
Still good.
Sacrifice? Helm of Obedience gets sacrificed, doesn't it?
No.
When that happens?
This is possible that this is a case where I stopped reading.
Bury Helm of Obedience and put that creature into play.
I stopped reading where I wanted to stop. I knew this and I forgot. Sometimes I just try to block things out that I don't want to be true. If you just don't read that last sentence. If the last card put into the graveyard as a creature card, bury Helm of Obedience and put that creature into play. This isn't even a case of me stopping before I got there. I just read that sentence. I just read it. I just read out the card to you, Alex, like 3 minutes ago. But I don't want it to be true, so I wipe it from my memory.
Right.
Current market price of $48.12.
Holding its value.
Not bad.
It's been about $50 for a while.
You say hold its value, it makes me want to look at Lake of the Dead too, because I think this held its value pretty well too. After actually it got up to over $200. Okay, I didn't realize it ever got that
I feel like when we were looking at this, it was $100.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was temporarily even that high.
That's sick.
If you just eliminate this, if you eliminate the chart between 2021 and the beginning of 2022, it's just a steady riser, consistent. Some might call this the Johnson & Johnson of Alliance's replacement lands. Just steady Eddie up and to the right. No big moves as long as you ignore this gigantic big move right there. If you ignore that big move, there's no big moves. It's just steady Eddie up and to the right. This is the kind of cardboard that I can invest in right here. You just buy up all those Lake of the Dead. You'll have if you hold for 15 years, this is a 17% kicker. Phyrexian Devourer is the next card I wanted to talk about, Alex. Yeah, the rares here in Alliances that made an impact over the years have been the ones that you can really exploit due to what I would call rules errors, bugs in the code. Phyrexian Devourer, 6 colorless, artifact creature, 1/1. If Phyrexian Devourer's power is 7 or greater, bury it. Activate with 0 colorless. Remove the top card of your library from the game to put a +X/+X counter on Phyrexian Devourer, where X is equal to that card's casting cost. It's reserve list. It has a rating of 2.389 on Gatherer. Nobody really used this card ever. Current market price of $12.86 because it jumped up here recently. It's held its value better than I thought it would. Not this many people can't actually be playing with Phyrexian Devourer.
It's niche. It's just for like that one combo, I think.
It's niche.
And it's reserve list.
We never did anything with this card back in the day. I'm not sure anybody did. I could be wrong, but I think many years passed before anybody started to brew anything competitive with this, and it's become a combo piece in Devourer decks. So it's typically comboed with Altar of Dementia or Fling. You grow the Devourer, you sack it to the Altar of Dementia, or you fling it at your opponent to kill them. How does it work? Well, this berry trigger goes on the stack. If Phyrexian, so this card, when it was originally printed, the spirit of this card, I think in the original spirit of this card, it was printed to probably never be bigger than a 6/6 and be functional. That was the idea.
Another card where we're talking about a wonky rules interaction.
But this one was rules lawyered to be turned into a weird combo piece. This berry, if Phyrexian Devourer's power is 7 or greater, bury it. The berry trigger goes on the stack. So you can continually respond to that trigger by exiling additional cards, removing them from the library, or removing them from the top of your library. Remove the top, taking them from the top card from the top of your library and removing them from the game. Holy shit. You can continually respond to that by paying 0 colorless to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you decide to quit doing that, quit activating for 0 colorless, if you have an activated ability that can be activated at instant speed, or if you have a spell that can be cast at instant speed, you can use that ability or that spell with what is now a gigantic Devourer. So you can't attack with it before you have to bury it, but you can fling it at instant speed before you have to bury it. So you can just remove stuff from the top of your library to make it 21/21 or 20/20 or bigger and fling it, right?
I don't
or
know.
alter. Yeah, you can. That's how it works. You continuously activate that ability for 0, remove things from the top of your library from the game to grow the Devourer. And then if you have 1 colorless and 1 red, you cast Fling, you fling it at your opponent. The other thing you can do is Alter Dementia to deck your opponent. I believe Alter Dementia. You sacrifice a creature to Alter Dementia, and you remove X cards from your opponent's library. Yeah, Alter Dementia is a 2 colorless artifact. Sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to that creature's power from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So you just grow your Devourer till it's 60/60, and you deck your opponent.
It's so dumb because I mean the card on its face tells you right there that you should destroy it whenever its power gets that big. Like that shouldn't be the sort of thing that ever goes on the stack. It should just be like a condition.
Triggers go on the stack.
You know?
I think that's how it works. I think triggers go on the stack, and it's a triggered ability. And if it goes on the stack, you can respond to it by activating it again.
A lot of people use it with Necrotic Ooze as well. As long as Necrotic Ooze is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards.
So how do you kill somebody with that?
I don't know.
Okay.
But the point is that it can do the same thing as the Devourer, right?
Oh yeah. But then you have to get say you have to get the Devourer in your graveyard, and then you use the Necrotic Ooze as a Devourer.
I mean, maybe you just use that so you have 8 of them in your deck instead of 4. I'm not sure.
Maybe. And then 4 is easier to cast than 6. Maybe. right? Because this is 4 casting costs and
Yeah.
Devourer 6 casting costs. Who knows? I didn't look into that. But that's Phyrexian Devourer. That's a rare that's gotten more popular over the years. Alliances, we never used it. Anything else you want to say about the Devourer, Alex?
I like the art. The art's pretty cool. It's like a giant, horrible Roomba.
It is a processor, potentially. Isn't there a card called Phyrexian Processor that looks a lot like this? I think it's...
Yes.
Some say this is a poo pile. I don't think it is. I think it's a
No, it's like
Phyrexian
a big
processor.
furnace-y sucking thing that's just like slow. I sort of picture it moving like really slowly, you know, like, "Rrrr," but maybe it's just stationary. It's like a structure and they come like fling stuff into it.
Well, I pictured it moving too. These look like wheels to me.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Could be wrong. Definitely not a poo pile, though. Did Mark Tidin do Phyrexian Processor too? Phyrexian Processor is a black card. That's all I remember. Oh, this is not even the one I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of a black card.
I know the one you're thinking of too. It has a big thing like that Phyrexian Devourer guy on it.
Yeah, it's like
And
the
I can't remember
same.
what it's called.
Shit, Alex.
Shit.
Anyways, I'm moving on to the next alliances. Rare of interest to me. This one is still fair. This one hasn't been broken in any way. This one is Varchow's War Riders. It's 1 colorless, 1 red, summon War Riders, 3/4, trample, rampage 1, cumulative upkeep. Put a survivor token into play under target opponent's control. Treat this token as a 1/1 creature. It's on the reserve list. It has a ranking of 3.720 on Gatherer, current market price of $3.25. This is the kind of card that somebody who likes to brew silly decks like myself that are also creature based wants to brew with. But it's hard. I don't know that anybody's ever made it like really good. You can make it fun at the kitchen table, but I don't know if anybody out there has ever made it really good. There is somebody in the pre-modern Magic Discord that I know has brewed with Farchild's War Riders. I need to look at some of his builds. I don't know exactly what he's come up with. Different cards you can run with the War Riders. Plague Spitter helps you deal with all the survivor tokens you're getting them. Just spits out 1 damage every turn. War Riders survive, the 1/1 survivor token dies. And Plague Spitter's just good. Just a good card too. So black red Plague Spitter War Riders deck. Engineered Plague. You can name survivors. Gets rid of the survivor tokens. But then you have to run a good enchantment that you want to run a lot of times to get rid of all your opponent's creatures. You have to run that enchantment just to get rid of all the tokens you're giving your opponent.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Pyroclasm.
I like Simoon.
Simoon. Dingus Staff. Some people have Earthquake. That was the classic War Riders and Earthquake. The Earthquake is good too because you're also dealing some damage to your opponent. And you're dealing damage to yourself too, but if you're playing War Riders, 2 casting costs, 3/4 trample, you're probably playing an aggressive red deck. You're hoping to deal damage faster to your opponent than they're doing it to you. So the Earthquake, even though it damages both of you, will hopefully bring your opponent down to 0 before you bring yourself down to 0. The Dingus Staff is cool. Not yet printed at this time when Alliances came out, but it does exist now, so you can run it. You can play it in pre-modern. It's an artifact printed in Weatherlight, 4 colorless. Whenever a creature is put into any graveyard from play, Dingus Staff deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. Your opponent is the controller of the survivor token. So if you Earthquake all their 1/1s, I think you deal 2 damage to them for each 1/1 you Earthquake. So now we're in like a 3-card combo here, but whatever. You're playing kitchen table Magic. It's kind of fun. Also, because the War Rider has trample and rampage, I like the idea of like running it with lore or tempting licit or something just to make all those 1/1s you generate block it, and then you give it rampage and it tramples over.
Okay.
Also, I'm like, what if we just put it in a damn burn deck? Like I said, it's just an aggro creature. And it tramples. It'll trample your 1/1s. They might be able to go wide on you and get a little bit of damage in. maybe a lot of damage if you go too long, because it is a cumulative upkeep of 1. But maybe just put it in a burn deck and you got a second turn 3/4 trampler you can play. War Riders to the face, bolts to the face, incinerates to the face, everything to the face. It's definitely not the best burn deck you could run, but this is a thing you could do with the burn deck.
So with Aether Flash, whenever any creature comes into play, it deals 2 damage to that creature. So all the survivor tokens would just get nuked as soon as they are generated.
Weatherlight. That's okay, that's a cool one from Weatherlight. 2 colorless, 2 red. I was thinking to myself, are there enchantments that, so this is along the lines of what I was wondering. I was wondering if certain types of cards existed. This is getting there. So whenever a creature comes into play, Aether Flash deals 2 damage to that creature. So like you said, they're just incinerated. Your opponent never gets them. Are there cards that actually harm somebody if a creature is brought into play under their control?
That one I don't know about. I mean, it seems to me like the sort of thing that it's got to be out there somewhere, but maybe not in old frame. And I'm not, I don't know one off the top of my head. Now, repercussion, whenever a creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to that creature's controller. So that's still part of like a 3-card combo now, though, because you have to still do the earthquake or the swoon or whatever.
Yeah.
But a good way to get some extra damage in on their controller, on your opponent.
Yeah. Word on the street is you have a Varchow's War Riders deck called
Morgan Varchild.
Morgan Varchild. I can't remember what was in Morgan Varchild.
It's a red-green deck. It uses simoons, earthquakes, kind of some of the few things we were talking about. I just put repercussion and Aether Flash in to try them out. What else? I have Flame Tongue Kavus in there, Lightning Bolts, red and green stuff.
So your strategy is like a red-green aggro deck. You're running the Varchild's War Riders because it's a good value for its power toughness, and you also include in the deck spells to deal with all those, to eliminate all those 1/1s you're giving your opponent.
Right. Also Rancor in here.
Yes.
Yeah. It's still work in progress. I'm gonna keep fiddling with it, but it's, I like Varchild's War Riders is a card I've always wanted to kind of mess around with.
It's an enjoyable card to brew with. Yeah. I always want to call it Warchild's War Riders. Don't know why. I might have called it Warchild's War Riders in this episode already accidentally.
I didn't hear it. I feel like I would have noticed it, but
next rare I wanted to highlight. We talked about this one. I think we might have talked about this last episode.
I think we just mentioned it, but we didn't really.
So Debbie Digger, classic Amy Weber art. 2 colorless artifact. You can pay 2 colorless and put the top card of your graveyard on the bottom of your library. It's reserveless. It has a rating of 3.720 on Gatherer. Current market price $5.95. What do people use this for? Well, there was a Browse Digger combo. We did talk about Browse in the last episode. It was an uncommon enchantment. You could use Browse to tear through your deck like a madman and then keep only the things that you need. Put those things that you need back into your library on the bottom. Right? The idea is to Browse exiles a bunch of shit, right? Why don't I just pull it up? I think with Browse, you look at 5 cards and you keep 1 and then you exile 4. Browse 2 colors, 2 blue enchantment. You can pay 2 colors, 2 blue. Look at the top 5 cards of your library and put 1 of them into your hand. Remove the remaining 4 from the game. So you're really tearing up you're tearing up huge parts of your library potentially with Browse. Your library's getting much, much smaller. But then with the card you kept, the cards you keep, you'll probably kept them because you want to play them. You will play those cards. They will then go into your graveyard. You could use the Digger to take them from your graveyard, put them back on the bottom of your library, which will now be much, much smaller if you've browsed multiple times. So you can shrink your deck and just repeatedly play the cards you want. I think that's how people played the Browse Digger combo. Apparently, you can also do this. Goat Llama on Gatherer on March 15th, 2012 at 5 hours and 43 seconds in the PM posted that Soldevi Digger was also used with Time Walk and Demonic Consultation to take infinite turns. Infinite turns.
Great.
Infinite turns. Don't underestimate this kind of card. I never saw that happen. But apparently it did, and that can happen. Use Demonic Consultation, consult for Time Walk, cast the Time Walk. No, you have to do it in the other order. You cast the Time Walk. It goes to your graveyard. You pay 2 colorless to activate the Digger. Put the Time Walk on the bottom of your library. Then you Demonic Consult for Time Walk. You throw out everything until you get to the bottom card on your library, the last card in your library, which is Time Walk. And then you cast it, and then you could just keep doing that. After you cast it next time, you dig it back. It's the only card there. You draw the card, you Time Walk. You just keep taking infinite turns.
Yeah.
You just keep Time Walking over and over, Alex.
Yeah.
It's apparently a thing people did at some point. I don't know if people still do it. I don't know how many formats. I mean, Time Walk in formats that it's in formats that it's not banned in, it's restricted. I don't think Soldevi Digger is banned or restricted in most formats, if any. Let me
I
pull
don't
this
think
up.
so.
So
I mean,
Debbie
yeah, you
Digger.
could do it in Vintage or whatever. Legacy.
Okay, it's not legal on Standard, Pioneer, Modern. Okay. So Debbie Digger. Legal and not restricted in Legacy, Vintage, Commander, Oathbreaker. So let's say Legacy, Vintage. Time Walk is restricted in Vintage. It's banned in Legacy, Commander, and Oathbreaker. So we're down to Vintage now. Is Demonic Consultation legal in Vintage? It's restricted in Vintage. So you could do this in Vintage. It's still an opportunity. There's still an opportunity for you to generate infinite turns with Demonic Consultation, Time Walk, and Digger. That's your kind of thing. We got a few more. We got a few more rares for you, Alex.
Okay.
Next one, Alex. This is the last one I want to say much about, and then I'm just going to do some brief honorable mentions. But this last one, it's a weird one. I don't know what to make on this card. It is Lodestone Bauble. And we're going to talk about some decks probably in the next episode. Some of these decks run this Bauble. There's multiple Baubles in this block. This is the Alliance's Bauble. It's 0 casting cost. It's an artifact. Pay 1 colorless and tap it. Sacrifice Lodestone Bauble to put up to 4 target basic lands from any player's library on top of his or her library in any order. That player draws a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Did I read it incorrectly?
You said library and then library instead of graveyard and the library.
Jesus Christ. I have a problem.
I have a problem.
Reading generally isn't difficult for me. I've always scored very highly on reading comprehension sections of like,
What's the talking and the reading? It's the reading and the talking with your mouth.
That's the problem. The speaking it's always been a problem for me.
It's like walking and chewing bubble gum.
And now I know I'm being recorded.
Yeah.
So it adds an additional element to it, an element of difficulty. Let's start over. Lodestone Bauble, 1 colorless, tap. Sacrifice Lodestone Bauble to put up to 4 target basic lands from any player's graveyard on top of his or her library in any order. I nailed it. That player draws a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. That was probably the least confident nailed it anybody's ever delivered, but I did nail it. This is a reserve list card.
Good.
Thank you. Rating of 3.870 on Gatherer. Current market price $2.81. People keep trying to spike this Lodestone Bauble, but nobody wants to hold the Lodestone Bauble. It just keeps going.
I'm glad to see it's not $15 anymore.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Get your shit together, people. There was an interesting ruling for this on Gatherer. I'm not going to pull it up. I'm just going to read it. Rulings. And this is obvious reading it, but they're just pointing it out. Up to four lands. Up to four means 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you choose 0 targets, you still choose a player. That player will draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So there are reasons why you might want to put lands from your graveyard on top of your library to draw them. Reasons why you might want to do that to your opponent. But you could also use this card to not move any lands around anywhere, and you can just use it to draw a card.
Yeah. So it has maybe versatility. I mean, not a lot. Like the things it does are maybe, you know, pretty niche in and of themselves, but it can do a couple things, and it can just draw you a card if you want.
Yeah. You could see some cases where, you know, you might want your opponent just to draw lands. Let's say they're already mana flooded.
Oh, yeah. If you have a way to, if they've been doing something, you know, something funny, some shenanigans, and they have basic lands in their graveyard, and now you can jam the top of their deck with them.
Yeah.
That would be a good move.
And, you know, this is there's in this format, we have mass removal. Things like Joko Hops, which blow up lands. You could use the Lodestone Bauble. You could play the Joko Hops at the right time. You could get in at the right time too, where you have spells in your hand that you can cast creatures, sorceries, enchantments, stuff like that. You blow up the land, you pop the Bauble, put the land back on top of your library, and then you rebuild your mana base faster than your opponent, you know. So and you could use it like that too. Or you could use it as a simple cantrip. Just have one less card in your deck. You throw the Bauble in. It's a 0 casting cost, draw a different card spell, you know?
Yeah. So one thing I want to try to do with this, and I know it sounds maybe counterintuitive, is destroy their lands and then stack the top of the deck with those lands. And it's kind of like, does that help them get the lands that they need back? If you do it at the right time, though, I think you could still mess up their draw with it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I've had the same thought, but then I have also had the thought, why?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do
that? Yes.
Yeah. Here's how I feel about that scenario. It could work out for you sometimes. It all depends, but like why? Why?
Yeah.
If you've mana screwed them successfully, and they have a handful of spells, it would actually be better for them to not draw the land for the next
right. Just let them draw, any combination of cards that might be land or not land. Yeah. So yeah, probably bad idea.
So I think it's a bad idea.
Okay.
Terrible. But I had the same terrible idea. I think there are better ways to use the Lodestone Bauble. We're in agreement. Okay. Honorable mentions. I know we've talked about some of these before randomly on other episodes of the Old Mage MTG podcast, but I just, we're going through the rares and alliances officially now, and I want to say there are a couple more that I like. I like Phyrexian Devourer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to like it.
My honorable mentions, they're just going to be what I consider to be good, fair cards.
I mean, some people use this, right? Some people do use it, I think.
Yeah, sacrifice decks. We've talked about these decks where you sacrifice things, keep bringing them back. Sacrifice things, keep bringing it back. Ashen Ghoul, Phyrexian Devourer, Squee, pitch into different stuff, bringing it back. Nether Spirit, Nether Shadow. It's a good, fair deck. It's a deck that many people have tried to improve upon, but it's hard to get above a certain level. The creatures are just not high enough power they just get overwhelmed by too many other strategies. But cards with this mechanics are fun because you feel like you're doing something every turn.
Mhm.
You're like a hamster having fun in its wheel.
Yeah, I don't like it when my hand dwindles down really low. And like, I need to be drawing more cards or recycling cards then. So
I'm gonna make a recursion deck like this with like low-powered creatures and stuff. I'm just calling it hamster wheel.
the hamster.
It's just gonna be like this. It's gonna be me having fun, like tons of fun.
Yeah.
Just like keeping busy every turn, but never really getting anywhere. But you
No, I
feel like
love
you
that. That's awesome. I like a deck where, yeah, I'm like just bringing stuff back, like churning.
you feel like you're doing stuff, man. You're really doing stuff when you're playing the Krovikan Whore. Another one, and this card is a little bit more competitive. At least it was in its day. We're going to talk more in depth about this card next episode, I think. Also has some Quentin Hoover art.
I have some things to say about this.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Ivory Gargoyle. I didn't have much to say about this. I was just going to say a good, fair card for a control deck. Comes back after a board wipe. We've talked about board wipes before. Maybe even run it in the same deck as a Kilderon Outpost. So a good little white-blue control deck in the Alliance's Ice Age block, where you have board wipes, you rebuild with Ivory Gargoyle and Kilderon Outposts. It's high casting cost though, and you can screw yourself with this. It's 4 colorless, 1 white, 2/2 flying. If Ivory Gargoyle is put into the graveyard from play, put it into play under owner's control at end of turn and skip your next draw phase. So there are situations where you could get yourself Gargoyle locked.
Yeah.
You can remove it from the game though by
You
paying
want to
4
draw a
colorless
card,
and
but you
1 white.
can't because you keep
Yeah.
just getting your gargoyle. Yeah.
I got a good pun for this card next episode.
We have to wait?
Yeah, it's next episode. I wrote it in the show notes. I want to use it right now, but I can't.
Okay.
I gotta wait. I got a Ivory Gargoyle pun.
All right.
I shouldn't have said that because now it's not going to live up to everybody's expectations. We'll see.
So here's what I was going to say about this. I've looked like rifled past this card plenty of times and always been like, this sucks. But you put it in the show notes and they mention it in this article. So I like looked at it again, and now that I'm looking at it again, I'm kind of like warming up to it a little bit. That's really all I wanted to say.
Okay, it's not bad for its time. It's got that Blinking Spirit energy, and in a world where Blinking Spirit was like a strong control card, Ivory Gargoyle is also a strong control card.
Yeah, I hate its initial casting cost, but it keeps coming back.
Yeah. You don't have to repay it.
And you don't have exactly. Yeah, it keeps. That's all I was trying to say. It keeps coming back into play automatically, and it's a flyer. It's a 2/2 flyer.
That's
so
big.
It's killable, but it can also be a threat and like finish your opponent off if you're playing a control deck and that's like the only unchallenged creature on the board or whatever. So, yeah, I could see it. There's probably just better options, probably, but my opinion of this has improved because I never really gave it a second thought before.
I think in its time, you're talking Ice Age Alliances.
Yeah.
Type 2. Good card.
You have Blinking Spirit and it doesn't fly.
Yeah, which it should, but
so this is like another alternative, yeah.
And then we have the Balduvian Horde. Not much to say here, except that it was 20 plus bucks in 1996 because it was a 5/5/4. We've talked about the Horde multiple times. Everybody's talked about the Horde. I've tried to run the Horde. Tried to run the Horde again recently.
I just never liked this.
Still disappointed. You never liked it.
I hate the discard at random. Like I have no control over that. I might discard something that I really need.
I think it was mentioned actually in this Impact of Alliances article somewhere. He mentioned that early on, 4 months into play with Alliances, the tournaments he's going to, nobody's really even running the Horde. So this is still early on when the casuals are still trying to get their hands on their Balduvian Hordes. The big time players, the competitive players, it's very clear to them that randomly discarding a card from your hand just ain't worth it.
Yeah.
Just ain't worth it. Anyways, quote from Lovisa Cold Eyes about Balduvian Chieftain. Peace will come only when we have taken Varchild's head. We learned about Lovisa last episode. And that's it. That's the end of my discussion on alliances. We're going to talk about alliances again at some point in this show. We're always coming back to old frame cards from different sets, but we've now officially
keep talking about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is what old people do. We just talk about the same stuff over and over again.
But because our memories are bad, next time it'll be a little bit different.
We don't even remember.
So
we are on episode 75. I guarantee you, we've talked about Balduvian Hordes, Krovikan Horror, Soldevi Digger, Varchild's War Rides, Phyrexian Devourer, and Helm of Obedience on at least 5 of these episodes.
Oh yeah, easy.
At least.
Easy.
If not 10. But this is the first time, these last two alliances episodes, the first time we officially sat down and went through alliances in some sort of organized manner.
Right. Yeah. We've talked about some of this before, but yeah, this is a themed episode on alliances specifically.
This is the end of our organized alliances discussion, but alliances will come up many, many times in the future on the Old Mage MTG podcast. We're going to move on to the last segment of the day. The last segment today is the last segment on most episodes of the Old Mage MTG podcast. We're going to wrap up with the Old Mage Commander Corner. We do different things in this segment in the Commander Corner. Sometimes we talk about just Commander in general. We've used it to learn the basic rules of Commander. Alex and I are not experienced Commander players. We've used it to review some articles we've read about Commander, about old frame cards that people still playing Commander. And we've also used it to build our first ever Commander decks. We did that last year. You built Group Mud. I built the Pump. 2 old frame Commander decks. This year, we're building our second Commander decks. 2024 is the year of a deck. My Commander deck featuring a Togatog as the commander. I've added a few cards to the deck so far. Today I'm going to add some more cards. The viewers, you're building this along with me. I'm getting suggestions from the viewers. I had a viewer last week suggest 2 changelings to me, actually. They are modern cards, but they come in old frame printings, so it's something that I am considering breaking into the modern MTG world, potentially, to bring some changelings into my deck, called a deck. But today I'm not going to add changelings. Today I'm going to add different cards. I still have more ATOGs to add, Alex. I think there are 12 ATOGs in Magic the Gathering. I've only added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including a Togatog. I'm going to add 2 more today. I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to add all the ATOGs. I'm not sure. At least all the old frame ATOGs. There is a new frame ATOG called Megatog, I believe. I don't believe I'm going to add Megatog. Although it is a shame that it's not an old frame card, because it's a good ATOG. But today I'm going to add 4 TOG. What did you say?
I should hope. A name like Megatog.
I know. It's a big one. It's a big one. 4 TOG is an ATOG from Mirage. For 2 colorless and 1 green, I get a 1/2 ATOG. I can sacrifice the forest to give 4 TOG +2/+2 until end of turn. Not the strongest of the ATOGs. But I'm limited in my card pool. To go along with the 4 TOG, I'm going to add a forest today. I'm light on land so far. I've just added dual lands and strip mines. The 4 TOG can eat a bayou. The 4 TOG can eat a savanna. the 4 can eat a taiga or a tropical island. I'm also given the 4 forest to eat. Since we've been talking about alliances in Ice Age, really hyped about Ice Age basic lands right now, especially Ice Age forests. So an Ice Age forest is going into this deck.
They're good. The Ice Age Force is nice.
They're so good. They're so good, Alex. Today I'm also going to add Lithatog. What is Lithatog, you might ask? It's a 3 casting cost ATOG. Originally printed in Odyssey. It's 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 green, 1/2. I can sacrifice an artifact to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. I can sacrifice a land to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's not limited to forests. Those are my ATOGs so far. So I have 8 ATOGs. Thaumatog, ATOG, Atogatog, Oratog, Foratog, Lithatog, Phantatog, and Psychotog. I got a few beaters. Psychotog can do major damage. Atogatog can do major damage. Oratog, when combined with Rancor, can do major damage. I've added dual lands and a forest and a strip mine. I have 2 mana rocks to feed to some of my ATOGs, Felwar Stone, Soul Ring. A viewer last week said, yes, you should add Felwar Stone to your deck. Thank you, I agree. I've added Animate Dead just because, you know, I'm in a 5-color, I have a 5-color commander. Some of my deck is just going to be general 5-color good stuff, and I consider an Animate Dead to be 5-color good stuff in a fun kitchen table commander environment. And then last week I was really proud about my addition of Cover of Darkness, which you can use to give fear to a creature type of your choice. When I pick ATOG, I'm going to be the only son of a bitch benefiting from that. Nobody else is going to be playing ATOG at all. This is the current state. This is the current state of a deck.
Burger?
Currently called a deck in progress. Last week, I think, Alex, you whittled your commanders down to 2 potential commanders. One, I believe, was called Airtie, the something.
Corrupted.
The Corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
In the second one was a Druid Centaur of some sort called Satan or Satan.
Yeah.
Or Seaton.
Yeah. Correct.
Alex, your deck is currently named Alex 2024. He don't have no dang commander yet. It's one of these 2. I don't know if you've decided yet. No pressure. You don't have to have decided by today.
No, I think I've decided.
Okay. Big news.
I was back and forth on this. But I think you should strike Urtai the Corrupted from the
list. Last week I was all about Urtai the Corrupted, but now after we talked about more druids today, I got psyched about druids.
It was very topical. I decided on this just before the podcast started, and then we started talking about a few cards already during the podcast that I was like, you know, good cards for the deck. So even though I think Urtai the Corrupted is really cool, especially because of the colors he would let me play, I think a little expensive to cast, not the worst, but a little expensive, and I think makes me a target like pretty bad. Like I'm gonna get him out, and before I can even do anything, people are gonna be like, "Oh, we got to get rid of that," you know?
Yeah, potentially.
Plus, I have to, then I have to figure out how I'm gonna make a 3-color deck. This is gonna keep me focused. I think just green, some druids, some stuff that goes with this tapping and untapping. It'll be like one kind of theme I can stick with, and it'll keep me focused and directed.
This is how I started getting back into Magic, not with monocolored commander decks, but like when we first started playing pre-modern. I mean, I just built mono green stompies, mono green decks, different types of mono green decks, 10 land stompies, stompy decks of different varieties, mono green land destructions. And then I did some mono red, learning some burn. I still got a lot more to learn about burn.
Well, it's nice to
get some goblins.
Kind of dig into like one area, and then you can like branch off from there.
It's been helpful, yeah. Not a bad idea. And the other thing is, it's probably relatively speaking, it's probably pretty budget friendly.
Also true, yeah.
I like budget friendly. Okay, Satan Crowsand Protector. Alex
Yeah.
has his 2024 commander chosen. I will update the name because Alex does have a dang commander yet. You got a name for the deck? Satan 2024 for now.
Not yet, but I'm
Okay.
sort of thinking something like Satan's power, you know,
Potentially.
potentially, so,
Druid, Satan, Crowsand Protector. Gotta think about it. Centaur. I got nothing. Something will come to me potentially. So Alex has his commander chosen. This is a big day for the
satanic centaurs,
This is a big day for the Old Mage MTG podcast. We're making major strides.
strides.
I forgot to mention this when I was adding my 2 ATOGs for the day. But I'm also considering this is one of the ATOGs, one of the limited number of ATOGs that I have access to, that I'm not sure if I actually want to run or not. I don't know. Necrotog.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm sure you remember this guy from Weatherlight.
Yeah, I have one.
1 colorless, 2 black, 1/2. Summon ATOG, remove the top creature card in your graveyard from the game, +2/+2 until end of turn. I don't love the 2 black, so there's a couple things with this card. I don't love the 2 black. And I guess maybe I'll decide when I get a little further into building the deck whether or not this guy goes in, because I'm also not sure how many creatures I'm gonna have. I guess it'll depend if I stick with ATOGs for the most part, or if I go heavy on ATOGs plus changelings, if I'm just going mostly ATOGs and I stay out of the modern card environment, so I don't bring many changelings in, if any. If I go that route, I might not even bother putting the Necrotog in, because how many creatures am I even going to have in the deck? If there's 12 ATOGs, I'll have some non-ATOG creatures too, but how many creatures would I have in my deck even? So then how many are going to get in the graveyard, and how many are even going to be in the graveyard to ever feed this guy? How much value am I going to get from him? I'm not sure. Got to think about it. But then there's a part of me that's like, it's an ATOG deck. I got to put in the Necrotog. There's not that many ATOGs. I got to put them all in. It's a hard decision.
Yeah, this one's a little tough. He's kind of one of the more underwhelming ATOGs to me. I think the big question I have is what other, like, you have other ATOGs that sacrifice, that eat ATOGs, you know what I mean?
Just one.
ATOG does,
Yeah.
right? And is that the only one?
I think so. Let me look again. I think that's it. So
because if you had a more reliable way to eat some of your creatures and get them into the graveyard, then that guy, the problem is that you have to balance like him using all of those creatures up to get the bonus versus maybe having a mechanism to bring your ATOGs back out of the graveyard, which
yeah,
I
maybe
think
that's
would
what I
probably
have to
be
decide
better.
if I want to. And I had thought about that too, because there are cards that bring all creatures of a certain type back from the graveyard. Patriarch's
Oh,
Bidding, for
really?
instance. I've thought about
What was
that.
that?
Patriarch's Bidding.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I believe that's what it does. So yeah, like I could go 2 directions. I could feed ATOGs to the ATOG, right?
Mhm.
And then so let's say that fails. I don't finish off my opponent. Or let's say I finish off one opponent, but then I still have other opponents. I can then swing big a second time by feeding those dead ATOGs to the Necrotog.
Right.
So I could use that strategy to get 2 big attacks. Or I could feed ATOGs to the ATOG to make them big. And then I could go the Patriarch's Bidding route to bring the ATOGs back. And that if I want to go that route, the Necrotog's not going to do me any good.
Yeah. And I sort of feel like the second way is better. You have more options because
Yeah.
you don't just have to do Patriarch's Bidding or something like that. You could be using like threshold effects or, any other sort of graveyard, returning spells or abilities.
Hmm.
You wouldn't have to get all your ATOGs. You wouldn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to get everything. You could even just do something that brings one or two of them back.
Yeah. Yeah, so Atogatog is the only Atog that you feed other Atogs to.
And none
So
of them do any of them do just like creatures? Like not ATOG specifically?
no.
No.
Psychotog allows me to pitch cards, so I could
Yeah.
discard to get them into my graveyard.
Okay.
So I could do that.
So yeah, so I like that maybe a little more. Since you have that down, you can, bring cards from your graveyard back to your hand and pitch them rather than removing them from the game with the Necrotog.
Yeah.
Which is the main thing I don't like. Like you said, 2 black, that sucks. And removes from the game is really hard for me. Like,
Yeah.
I know there's nowhere else really to go from the graveyard, but out
And
of
it's the top creature card in my graveyard too. So let's say I got into a situation where let's say I put a clone in my deck. And I use a clone to clone another Atog. And that clone is killed. Then that clone acts as like a stopgap for my Necrotog. Like my Necrotog can't then access anything below that clone in my graveyard.
Right. But it doesn't have to be an ATOG, it's just top creature card. So
Oh
the
yeah, okay.
Necrotog could still eat the clone. But I still
Read
take
the
your
card.
point that
Read the card, Steve.
no, but I mean your point still sort of stands that it can only affect the top creature cards, so that gives you less, control and versatility over what you're eating out of your graveyard. Yeah, I would lean away from it unless you really need another ATOG.
Yeah. Which I'm not sure if I do. My last commander deck, I totally loaded up with creatures. I tried to go creature horde, pack as many creatures as I can. I don't need to do that necessarily. I think I might want to go a limited number of creatures and then just try to do big things with the few creatures that I have.
Well, like you could put Shallow Grave in this deck. That might be a good addition, You
In
can
the
like,
five color good stuff.
we're getting, I know you have a couple black spells in here already, so we're getting a little black heavy, but to be able to pull out one of those ATOGs that can pump itself like really, really big and give it haste like all at once is a pretty nice move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like one of these ATOGs are all low casting costs. So let's say I play a ATOG early in the game. It gets killed. Later in the game, I may have more food for it on the board. So if I could shallow grave it later in the game, bring it back out of nowhere, and then really stuff it full of food.
And even reanimate too, because reanimate you're paying based on the creature's casting cost, the amount of life you're paying, So if you reanimate one of your ATOGs, you're going to lose 2 life.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if I have a reanimate. I have one shallow grave. I may or may not have one reanimate. And these are enchantments. More food for my Oratog. More food for my Fantatog. More food for my Thaumatog. I need an Enchantress in this deck now. Enchantratog. Anyways. Alex, I'm done.
None of those are enchantments, are they?
What did you say?
Shallow Grave's not an enchantment, and I don't think.
What am I talking about? Shallow Grave is not. Reanimate's not an enchantment? It's an enchantment.
No, it's a sorcery. No.
Really?
Animate Dead's like the only one.
Really? What? I know Shallow Grave isn't. I don't know why I was saying that. Sorcery. This card doesn't look like it should be a sorcery. I'm cutting this part of the episode out.
Well, it's one of the things that makes the card so good is that they can't destroy
Get rid of it. Yeah.
the enchantment. Like it's just a permanent effect that happens.
Okay. That's it. That's the end of the commander corner.
That's
I don't
it.
know what the hell's going on any longer. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I can't read. When I do read, I can't remember. I can't process information. I can't retain information. I can't communicate properly. Maybe this podcasting thing is not for me, Alex.
We'll reevaluate. May or may not be back next week.
I'm not stopping. I got nothing else to do. I ain't got shit to do. This is our Northwestern, Alex. Nobody else knows what that means yet, but
They will.
we never give up. You don't give up on Northwestern. You keep
No.
trying to do that shit for
Scratching
30,
your scratch off tickets.
40 years. You keep failing. You keep drinking your Bush Lights.
Keep
You
delivering
keep living.
your newspapers.
You keep living in your mom's basement. You keep garage. You keep vacuuming carpets at the mausoleum during the night shift.
That wouldn't be so bad, actually.
You know, if that's the job you really want, you could probably make that happen.
You'd be pretty quiet aside from the monotonous droning of the vacuum cleaner.
You could make that happen if that's really your dream. I guarantee you. Actually, I don't know. Those jobs are limited.
Yeah, it's Roombas
It's all
doing
nepotism.
it. That's robotic vacuum cleaners.
You're gonna get replaced by a Roomba.
Yep.
Anyways, that's the end of episode.
Good show.
It could have been better, but it could have been worse. I'm happy with it. We'll put it out there. You got anything you want to say to the viewers before we head out, Alex?
I don't think so. Thank you for listening. Be careful out there.
Okay. See you all next week.